Have you ever thought about the hidden gears that make our world turn? You know, the small, totally unseen events that just flip a switch and change everything? Well, today, we're going to peel back that curtain and uncover some of these invisible forces, these surprising turning points that shape it all, from our history and borders to the actual wiring of our brains. So let's jump in.
Okay, I know. It sounds like the start of a really weird joke, right? A map, a brain, a chimp, and a sunburn. But stick with me here, because by the end of this, you're going to see how these four totally random things are actually perfect examples of these hidden switches, these tiny little triggers that have massive, massive consequences.
All right, our first switch is a historical one. We're going back 500 years to a simple, honest-to-goodness printing error. And yeah, it might seem like just a minor mistake, but as you're about to see, this one little blunder helped rewire how we see the entire planet.
So picture this. It's 1525. The map, made by Lucas Cranach the Elder, was supposed to show the Holy Land. But in the workshop in Zurich, nobody caught a pretty, critical detail. It was printed backwards. The Mediterranean Sea was on the east instead of the west. But for an audience in Europe who didn't really know that part of the world, the mistake just slipped right by.
This is where it gets really interesting. You see this quote from Professor MacDonald at Cambridge? He calls it both a failure and a triumph. I mean, how on earth could a backwards map be a triumph? Well, even though it was wrong, this map completely transformed the Bible. And way more importantly, it unleashed a powerful new idea into the world.
The thing that made this map such a game changer was that it showed the 12 tribal regions of Israel as these clearly divided territories. Before this, most maps were way more symbolic. But as Bibles with these maps got out there, the idea of drawing lines to define land, it just caught on. And slowly but surely, those symbolic lines on a sacred map started to morph into the real, concrete political borders we all live with today. A historical switch was flipped, completely by accident.
Okay, so let's shift from a switch that rewired society to the switches that are busy rewiring our own brains. It turns out our brain's development isn't this smooth, gradual process we might imagine. Nope. It's more like a series of distinct phases, separated by these really sudden turning points. So, new research out of Cambridge looking at thousands of brain scans has pinpointed 5 major epochs in our brain's life. As you can see, there are 4 key moments where our neural wiring goes through a huge reorganization. The first big shift is around age 9, which kind of kicks off adolescence. But it's the next one that is the real shocker. 32. Yep, that's the age that researchers are calling the strongest topological turning point in our entire life. What that means is the whole adolescent phase of brain development, all that rewiring and sorting things out, it doesn't really end in our teens. It keeps going until our early 30s. So if you've ever felt like you were still figuring things out well into your 20s, guess what? Your brain was right there with you. All right, let's switch scales again. We're going from our individual lives, way back, into our deep evolutionary past. So where does our relationship with alcohol actually come from? Is it some modern thing, or is it something much older? This brings us to the drunken monkey hypothesis, and the idea is pretty simple. For millions of years, our primate ancestors were out there eating ripe, fermenting fruit that had naturally occurring ethanol in it. So over all that time, an attraction to the smell and taste of alcohol could have actually become an evolutionary advantage, pointing them to food that was packed with calories. And now there's new evidence that really backs this idea up. A study from UC Berkeley measured the alcohol in fruits that wild chimpanzees in Uganda and the Ivory Coast were eating. And get this, when you adjust for body mass, their daily diet exposes them to the ethanol equivalent of nearly 2 standard drinks for a person. So the takeaway here is pretty huge. Exposure to alcohol isn't new at all. It's an ancient, routine part of the primate diet. Our taste for it isn't some modern flaw. It's much more likely an evolutionary switch that got flipped millions of years ago, a legacy handed down from our fruit-loving ancestors. For our final switch, we're zooming all the way in, down to the molecular level, inside a single skin cell. We all know sunlight can give you a sunburn, but scientists have just discovered this hidden switch that UV radiation can flip, turning that damage into something way more dangerous. So inside our skin cells, we've got this protective protein called YTDF2. You can think of it like a security guard. Its main job is to keep inflammation under control. But what researchers at the University of Chicago found is that UV radiation from the sun literally breaks this protein down, basically turning the whole defense system off.
And once that security guard protein is gone, a crazy chain reaction kicks off. A tiny RNA signal that was being kept in check is suddenly let loose. It then activates an immune sensor, which triggers this powerful and harmful inflammatory response. This is the molecular switch that can turn a simple sunburn into a potential trigger for skin cancer.
So, a backwards map, a 32-year-old brain, a fruit-eating chimp, and a sun-damaged cell. What's the thread? What in the world ties all of these stories together?
Every single one of them is a hidden switch, a historical accident that ends up redefining geography, a developmental turning point that redefines what it means to be an adult, an evolutionary echo that explains a modern habit, and a molecular breakdown that turns a protector into a threat.
What this really shows us is that so much of our reality, our societies, our bodies, our very cells, is governed by these invisible forces. Things we just take for granted every day often have these incredibly complex and totally surprising origins, and it all hinges on a switch being flipped at just the right or wrong moment. And really, that's the question that drives science, isn't it? These switches are operating all around us and inside of us every single day. The more we look, the more we find. So you have to wonder, what other hidden mechanisms are out there, quietly shaping our world, just waiting for us to find them?